you've got a government who, the only policy they have is an environmental policy. They haven't got a food policy. And that is very, very frustrating. They don't really want to talk about food production or being a food producer. They just want to talk about the environment. And everything they've got coming out currently is all about the environment.
Farmers in the UK are going through substantial change following the country's exit from the EU. The question of direct payments is less of a feature in UK farms, and the industry is facing more open market competition with increased environmental requirements. Perhaps the UK is moving in a similar direction as the EU, with the goal of cheap food coupled with a sustainable agricultural industry. However, the rubber hits the road at a farm gate level, as farmers must make a living first and then comply with national policies along the way. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We'd really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. From a distance, all UK arable farms look big in comparison to Irish farms. However, the farms are often run by a handful of people who are well equipped to get over the work. Andy Mahon, a Dubliner, is one of these farmers who manages a very large block of land in the southeast of England. Andy, you're very welcome to the Tillage Edge podcast. It's been a while since we spoke last, and there's certainly been lots of ups and downs, especially in the grain market. How are you faring on that front in terms of selling grain?
Funny enough, we're moving quite a lot this week. So I held on, and then November time, beginning of November last year, a lot of us, probably half of ours are on contracts, and that just moves on a price basis anyway. But then the half our wheat's probably talking about 1,800, 2,000 tons that just I sell as the season goes, sort of thing. We can store all our grain here on farm. So beginning of November, the price started to fall, and I sort of got cold feet, I suppose, and I sold quite a chunk then. Probably 600 tons, and then the market just kept dropping away, and I came back. I met with the owners here, and we just took the choice to sell everything basically, and the markets just kept dropping away, which is probably what you in hindsight, it looked, we should have started selling a bit sooner, but I really didn't see the market dropping away. But I think livestock producers, the pig industry is on its knees in this country. The poultry guys are on their knees, and they're big consumers of wheat, and they're not buying any feed, obviously, and trying to limit it because it's the price it's so high, and they're going out of business. A lot of them, they're just not restocking after. So I think although everything was pointing to an upward market, it's gone very flat now at the moment. It has picked up again recently, but we hit just below 200, and it's just hovering above 200 now. But we've sold reasonably well. I'm pretty happy. Like, we've got good profit locked in. So yeah,
great. Yeah, and it's looking certainly. It seems to be going down every other day, and the outlook for next harvest, a lot of things have got to change for it to come back in and make up for the price of fertilizer, which didn't come down quick enough either. Exactly that.
I mean, we're putting on fertilizer that we've bought at 700-800 quid a ton, and if wheat's sort of sat sort of 250 to 300 pounds a ton, it's a bit less painful. But when wheat sat around 200, and we're putting on fertilizer that we spent that amount of money on, it's a bit more painful. And of course, all the other inputs, all the sprays and everything have gone up 10-15% this year. Probably about 15% on average. I think fungicides will be up this year. So and everything, diesel, everything's going higher. So you got to be a bit careful.
Yeah, I suppose that's one end of it, and the other end is you need a crop to sell to make a margin, I suppose. And the other side of it, how did your autumn go in terms of getting crops in, or how are they all looking now?
Yeah, we had a tremendous autumn. I have to say, drilling went really, really well. We're no-till, as you know, so we don't do any cultivations. After the summer we had, there was some deep cracks. We had enough rain, sort of September, we had about 40 mil of rain, and that just softened things nicely. And we got everything in really well, actually, in October, beginning of October there, beans and wheat. And it's come through the winter very well. There's one out of probably 300 hectares of wheat, there's probably 20 that's got a lot of black grass in it that I'm a bit disappointed with, but the rest of it all looks pretty good. We got fertilizer on quite early, beginning of February. We got first dose of urea on, and things were looking okay. Actually, February was a lovely month, and I was it's very early for us. It was cold, but I did some spring drilling. We drilled 80 hectares of oats in the end of February. and then it started raining in March, and it just hasn't stopped. We've had rain virtually every day in March, and we've ended up 120 mil of rain, so which is a lot for us at that time of year. Normally February's wet and March is dry, but it was cold. The oats took 3 weeks to come out of the ground, but they're up and away now, and actually the weather seems to have turned. Now we've hit the 1st of April, the weather seems to have turned again, and it's looking a lot better this week. So generally I'd say that some good crops of wheat about. I've been around and about the last month or so. We went up to Yorkshire, and I've been over in Cambridge this morning, and there's some good looking crops of wheat around. There's good potential out there, I think. So if nothing else, hopefully yields will be good if the weather plays ball now.
I suppose despite all the giving out about rain in March, it's good to get the rain, I suppose, because you're probably looking a bit dry there for a while, were you?
It was actually, it was getting dry towards the end of February. People were starting to wonder, because we hadn't really, water levels were well down after last summer, and people were starting to panic a little bit, particularly guys who irrigate. But yeah, we've had a good, February's been good and wet. We've had 3 or 4 dry days now, and there's a bit more rain forecast Thursday, I think, and a bit catchy over the weekend. But you kind of expect a few showers this time of year, but we were getting sort of prolonged heavy rain there. So and it did wet the fields up a lot. It was very wet last Friday and Saturday here. So but no, things will dry out.
And
I always think of this.
Have you finished all your spring planting, Andy, or you have a bit more to do?
I've still got a bit more to do. I wanted to. We drained 2 fields last year, and I want to mold drain those before we drill them. So yeah, I'm just. Hopefully we'll get mold draining again. It'd be 2 days of mold draining, and then probably a day's drilling then. And I've got a bit of drilling to do locally as well for a dairy farmer down the road. I've got some spring barley to put in, but like I say, soil temperatures are only just coming up towards 10 now. It's been cold. We had frost last night, so I'm not too panicky. I'd drill oats up until the middle of April without too many worries. They probably won't yield quite as much as the February drill stuff, but won't be a disaster.
Okay. Just to turn the conversation a little bit different, I was just thinking about, and lots of people have been asking me, I suppose, about the UK and what you thought about how changes are coming to pass across the UK since the UK left the EU. It just appears, I suppose, from the outside here, there seems to be lots of mixed messages maybe coming from the UK government. How do you, or maybe the farm owners, how are you viewing that policy or the general direction, or how hard is it to make decisions?
It's a dog's dinner, really, Michael. I think it's what I'd say. You got a government who the only policy they have is an environmental policy. They haven't got a food policy, and that is very, very frustrating. They don't really want to talk about food production or being a food producer. They just want to talk about the environment. And everything they've got coming out currently is all about the environment. It chops and changes on a month-by-month basis. But Michael Gove was DEFRA minister for a good period, and he sort of tried to drive the environment and food together. And he came up with a plan for elms and the current schemes that we're starting to see rolling out now, environmental-wise. But what he did also instigate was Henry Dimbleby to produce a food report, which he has done. And this current government and the current sort of DEFRA ministers are totally ignored, and they're not really interested in it, it seems. And that's gone by the wayside. So it is very difficult to plan. All we can plan is with, our BPS will be down to 50% of what it was historically next year, and it's gone by 2028. There's reasonable money in the environmental schemes, but they're very slow to roll out. They're well behind. I think they're virtually 12 months behind where they wanted to be rolling out these schemes. And they made a load of announcements early part of the year, but most of those schemes won't be bolted in or ready to go until June or July. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're pushed back a little bit as well. So there's an enormous sense of frustration, I think, from farmers over here. Lack of direction from the government. We're very much take the view a few years ago that we sort of try and lower our cost of production, be realistic about what we can produce. We're a bit more, when I was out in Australia many years ago, it was very cutthroat, and to the point where guys would just make the decision on the day whether to plant a crop or not. And we're fast sort of heading to that direction, I think, where we don't commit to a crop really until I start drilling, because I haven't done any cultivations. So, we're very much go with the flow a little bit, I suppose, and try and where the opportunities are there. But if I think there's no point in us growing half a crop. We've got to grow what we grow has got to go in well, and it's got to produce well, sort of thing. So if there's any sort of doubt that conditions aren't quite right or whatever, we just hang back a little bit, and we're looking to diversify. Well, we've had a couple of good years, good harvests. We're changing all our grain drying equipment at the moment. We've invested in a bit of drainage. That grain drying equipment, we're all on floor grain drying and storage. So we're moving to electric fans that are variable speed fans. So they, variable load rather. So they'll spin up and spin down depending on how much grain they're trying to get through. And, they're all got sensors in the grain. So they'll only switch on when they need to and when the temperature's right. So that should save us money as well. And so we're trying to invest in sort of capital projects like that. We've got a few off-farm. We've got some industrial units that we set up a few years ago, and a few.
And can I bring you back to that maybe just a second? Can I go back just a little bit, if you don't mind? If you just go back a little bit to, you mentioned that the basic payment is now 50% of what it might have been in the past. It certainly within Ireland or the EU, I think the larger payments are probably going to end up being back, maybe not quite 50, but 30%, I think, by the time for tillage guys within a few years. But I suppose each year that goes by, the linkage to environmental requirements in order to claim that here, certainly in Ireland, have increased. Is it something similar in the UK? Have those environmental conditions or conditionality of claiming that, have they increased year on year?
Not really. I mean, we still got cross compliance, which is obviously similar to what you've got throughout the EU. If you want to access any sort of grant, any sort of payments or subsidies, if you like, the only ones available are environmental. And up till probably pre-Christmas, the government's attitude was it should be income forgone. So you basically just got paid what it was costing you to put in, these environmental, say, wild bird mixes or something. They weren't actually paying you an earning or a living or a profit on top of that. It was just income forgone. They've slightly tweaked and of course, I don't think they saw that everything, skyrocketed, the cost of seed, the cost of diesel, everything. So they have increased payments, but it's still not massively attractive. And I think the problems with the environmental schemes we've got is that, for a no-till sort of environmentally minded farmer like myself on the lowlands of England, it's fine. For guys in the uplands, sheep farmers in the uplands, for example, there's nothing in it for them. I can pick an insecticide, choose not to use insecticides, and I can get £40 a hectare for doing that. Come June, I can sign into that agreement. That's no good to guys in the uplands who are grazing sheep, up in Cumbria or up in the hills. So there's even guys I know. I talked to a chap recently who manages a big operation over in Norfolk, and they've got low-lying sort of flooded wetlands that they graze in the summer, and there's absolutely nothing that he can enter his. And these are, really sites of significant interest environmentally, but there's nothing in those schemes that he can enter into it. So, they haven't got it right, really. It's okay for the majority, but if you're a traditional plough, sort of combi drill type farmer, you're going to struggle to access any payments, if you like. They really want to push everybody down the zero-till route and no insecticides and less inputs, and you'll get payments for that. I mean, there won't be anything like BPS was, but you can recoup sort of probably half of what you were getting under BPS, maybe.
Right. That's and is there, in terms of those environmental schemes, is it you kind of go into a particular scheme and you have to do 5 or 6 different things, or is it a menu type basis where there's a list as long as your arm and you pick 5 or 10 of them, or as many of them as you can do and you get paid X amount on all of them?
It's so complicated, Michael. They've done their very best to make it simple. And they took what we've had previously have been quite simple schemes where you have to accrue a certain number of points, for example, to gain that payment per hectare. Now you've got this, as an arable farmer, I've got a choice of 3 arable standards, high, medium and low. And then bolted onto that as well, I've got 3 soil standards. This is in the Sustainable Farming Incentive, the SFI, which is the base level environmental scheme. And then I can bolt in 3 arable soil standards, high, medium or low, and they get progressively, very little tillage. They talk, to full no-till. they've just various different standards for each one of the payments go up accordingly. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like 30, 45 and 65 pounds a head, or per hectare rather, for each level. It's something in that region. And then on top of that, they've rolled out these other things that you can bolt on coming from June onwards, like no insecticides, reduced fertilizer usage. And again, there's different payments for those. I don't think those payment rates, the only one I've heard is £40 a hectare for being insecticide free. So there's I think there's 6 of those standards coming as well. I mean, and then it pulled into those, there's also hedgerow standards, which they pay a pittance. They're not really worth considering. I don't think they pay hardly anything. And the whole crux of it is the protection of soil and water and air quality. That's what they're aiming for. So they're the base level schemes. And then you go into countryside stewardship, which is a bit of a higher level scheme. Again, you can put in so many hectares and then you pick out what options you want out of that as well. So for instance, my countryside stewardship scheme has a grass and legume 2-year lay, which unfortunately, which again I disagree with, but I can't do anything about it, is you're not allowed to cut that for silage or anything, which I think is a great management tool and a great shame you can't.
Sure.
You can only top it. So it's basically like a fertility building lay for 2 years. I've got wild bird mixes in mine as well. So we plant food for wild birds. We feed wild birds as well, seeds over winter. I've also got grass margins against watercourses, which again for me is a bit of a no-brainer. So a 6-metre margin against all our watercourses, and then we have got some hedgerows in there, so we only cut those hedgerows that are in the scheme once every 3 years. And there's a few others we've got as well around various parts. Wildflower mixes as well, so the grass and wildflower mixes around the edges of our solar parks and bits that we can't really farm because of small awkward areas. We've put those in as well. So for us, it works quite well. And then you've got capital grants bolted on top of all of that lot as well. So they can be standalone or as part of the agreement. We've planted 500 trees and 3 kilometres of hedgerow this winter on part of our capital works. And then we're hoping we've put in a rainwater harvesting system for spray water. So that's we've got I think it's 120,000 litres of rainwater storage and harvesting now, which that works really, really well. I'm really pleased with that. And then there's grants towards concrete, and we've got broken areas of yard as well. And again, this is for water protection, groundwater protection. They want us to reconcrete the parts of the yard. But again, the grant doesn't really cover, probably only covers 30% of the cost. I mean, it's better than nothing, and we probably will do it at some point, but not just at the moment. And then the bigger scheme overall is landscape recovery scheme, which is where they're looking for groups of farmers or massive estates, sort of 10,000 acres at a time, to pull together for really significant areas or interest. I'm trying to think of it. I don't know of one scheme that's been set up yet, but I think the sort of coastal areas where there's a particular habitat they want to protect, or say peat uplands or something like that, where they want to really protect that area, they'll try and get either one big estate or several farmers to pull together and create, a scheme. You have to do it in conjunction with them to create a scheme like that, but there won't be many of those agreements.
But you know what, Andy, it sounds very similar to the EU scheme. An awful lot of that.
Oh, right.
It doesn't sound massively different. We have an array of complexity, I suppose, is the best way to put it, in terms of the various different things that can be actions that can be done that probably don't pay a huge amount, and actions that are probably slightly better than others. But I suppose the thing that strikes me as you're talking about it, one, is that you sound quite knowledgeable about it all. And I suppose I was wondering, do you try and complete all of those, inform yourself of all of those, or do you have help coming in onto the farm to try and navigate all of those options for what's best for you?
I mean, one of the things they've done is you can get a day's free advice from an advisor on this. And I mean, one day just isn't enough. If you've got a guy coming on farm who's never visited before, but they'll pay that advisor. There's only a certain number of advisors that are registered to do it. But yeah, I try and keep briefed myself. But even now, I mean, I've had to employ a guy. I'm waiting for his bill. I'm sure it'll be a hefty one. He's helped me go through with my countryside stewardship scheme this year, because that's what he does, and it's so specialised. And I think this is what they were trying to get away from it and make it simple enough that farmers can apply. And actually, the application process for SFI is very, very easy online. I could do it in about half an hour, probably, for the farm. But it's when you want to start really milking into the capital grants and being a bit savvy about what you can and can't do. And I'm probably a bit conservative, whereas the guy Paul, who's helped me do my application, he's just gone all out and claimed for absolutely everything. And he's probably gained us more money from doing that and opened my eyes to being able to do more and layering. I've always been afraid about layering stuff in because you get done for double funding, but he's like, well, that's their problem. They've got to pull it out. If they think you've double funded, they've got to realize that you have. And it's them. He's very good. He's brutal with I'm glad he's fighting my corner, actually, and I think it's money well spent, actually, because he probably earns his fee very easily from the extra income that we get by using him to apply. So
okay, so that's becoming a valuable source of income then in terms of your overall farm income, is it?
What I would say is it's enabling us to do capital works like the rainwater harvesting and stuff I wouldn't have done without the capital grant towards it. The hedge planting and stuff I probably wouldn't have done without the grant. So I suppose the capital works is very useful because that's enabling me to do stuff which I think is very valuable around the farm, but probably stuff I wouldn't be able to justify doing, spending 30 grand planting hedgerows. I probably can justify it, but actually if I get a grant that covers half of it, that makes it a bit more palatable then. The rainwater harvesting, the grant covered all of it. So it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when you look at because you've a big block of land there and there's various other different bits and pieces you're doing. You mentioned before you were doing there's a solar park there and I think you might have mentioned a house rental, and I think you were about to say you might have industrial units and various different bits and pieces. In terms of the overall large unit, in terms of all the bits and pieces that are to be managed there, where does farming kind of sit in all of that now? As in, I suppose in my head, back in the past, maybe 20 years ago, and I'm just taking that as a number, that might have been number one. Is it still close to number one, or is it now kind of going way down on the priorities, if you like, in terms of the overall income?
It's still number one. I mean, it's still our biggest income. But my brief here from the owners has always been, we need to diversify the income so we're not so reliant on and at the mercy of farm policy or, the weather or, these random things like, Russia invading the Ukraine. So that's why we have, the solar parks. We have some industrial units that we rent out. We're trying to convert more industrial lets as well. Another shed that we've got down at another yard. And there's real demand for it. It's a bit of these things pay back in probably 6 or 7 years. We're looking at, believe it or not, dog walking fields are very popular over here now. And again, good money, fence off, a couple of acres with grass and a few trees and make it a bit nice, but doesn't, so people have got a naughty dog. They can walk the dog without worrying that it's going to disappear over the horizon. They won't be able to find it. So we're looking at doing that as well. And it's just about having some smaller extras, if you like, that don't impact too much on the farm. The farm was still important to us, and we're still farmers, but we need those to help us to, all sort of molds together. We can't do one without the other, if you like, a lot of the time. So farming's still our number one income, but I could see we could get to a point where solar and industrial lets could eclipse it, or certainly, match it. So
yeah, you got to say it's changing times for sure when you have that, but I suppose it's having that population around, probably lends itself to being able to leverage some of the potential income streams that having people with money around you can do, I suppose. Absolutely.
I mean, we're not at this point in time sort of looking to do any sort of public facing, selling, other than maybe that, if we do go down the road doing this dog walking field. I mean, we've already got a bit of a new woodland that we planted that's fenced, and it seems obvious to rent that out for something like that. We are fairly urban where we are. We've got plenty of people on our doorstep. So, I mean, I could see a point in the future where we might do something, but at the moment, it's not quite on the radar. But the demand for small industrial units for small businesses is huge, but there's more demand than there is supply in the market at the moment. But planning is the massive issue, and I don't know if anybody's watched Clarkson's Farm, but
Yeah.
the issues he has with planning, it's not just exclusive to Oxfordshire. It's Bedfordshire is worse, if you like. We're just really banging our heads against the wall trying to get stuff through planning at the moment, or even just get an answer, a yes or a no answer would be great. But we're not even getting that. We're not getting any help. There's just no planners, and there's no interest in trying to push these things forward. That's really holding not just me, but I know a lot of guys back. I was talking to a farmer recently whose shed got burnt down. It was arson, burnt the straw shed down. It was an old barn, or part of it was an old stone barn. He wants to just rebuild it the same as it was, and he can't. He has to get permission to alter it slightly to rebuild it, and they won't give him permission at the moment. So
Right.
it's crazy,
Okay.
absolutely crazy.
Again, it has similarities to Ireland over here as well, because we know loads of things like that happening too. But can I ask you, just in terms of when you stand back and you're looking at it, and obviously you still have a fairly long career in arable farming in the UK, where do you think it'll go within 10 years' time? Obviously, there'll be less payments, certainly from a direct payment point of view, and more payments from an environmental point of view. Where do you all see it kind of shaking out?
I mean, it's a very good question. I don't know is the honest answer, Michael, at the moment. I think you can only sort of farm with what's in front of you, and it's very difficult, really, really difficult to plan at the moment because, crop prices are so volatile as I've ever seen them in my career, and the input prices as well. And I think we've just got to be, I think it's farmers who are perhaps a little bit more switched on. I feel sorry for the smaller family farms, perhaps, who are paying big rents and stuff. They're going to really find times quite hard going forward, I think. Guys like yourself were fairly well situated. We have got other incomes, so that helps. But I think what the government are probably hoping or seeing is that with the net zero legislation coming down the line as well, there's going to be more private money coming in. We've got a thing called biodiversity net gain now, where big building applications have to offset environmentally. They're looking at farmers to do that, so you can get money for putting a pond and a habitat in a couple of hectares of the farm, and that's private money that comes in. You can't claim a government grant scheme to do that, but that's just kicked in. That's just the biodiversity net gain rules have just come in, and I think as well with the net zero, there's guys looking carbon sales. I don't know if that's kicked off in Ireland, but there is a raft of cowboys on the horizon trying to buy carbon credits or get you to generate carbon credits and sell them. You've got to be very, very careful.
You're not a believer yet, then I take
it. I've done a fair bit of homework on it, and we have signed up with a scheme actually, one that I'm fairly confident. I've spoken to a lot of people about it, and one guy in particular who's done a lot of research across worldwide on this. Has assured me it's the most robust scheme he's come across. So I took that as a pretty good indicator. So we have signed up with the scheme, and we've done a lot of soil testing and auditing. We're in the first year of audit, so it'll be our first, after harvest, we'll go through our first audit process and then generate credits. Probably be this time next year.
How significant are they, do you think, Andy?
For us, could be a six-figure income.
Really?
Six-figure income. So you're talking quite significant amount of money, and that's
because of the no-till system that you're in, and there are various different bits and pieces we're doing. Is it?
Mainly because of that. And I think as well with the new hedgerows we're planting as well, hedgerows are a great carbon sink as well. So they'll start to pull in. We're planting a field of agroforestry next winter, which we're well on with planning, and we'll start laying that out. Probably in May we'll start prepping the ground for that. So things like that will only boost it more. I mean, how that market's going to play out, I don't know. The food companies are going to have to inset their carbon footprint up the supply chain. Well, that will come all the way back up to the farmer to try and help with that. So, I mean, I'm just wary. We don't want to be selling it too cheap. But I think if we start generating the credits and they're sat there, then we can start cashing them in. But it's an interesting market, and I don't know quite how that's going to play out. But I think the government would very much like to see more private money coming in that way. I'm just very wary of it. It's there's a lot of potential, but equally there's a lot of potential for a slip up there as well.
Well, certainly it sounds like certainly in all the conversations we've had last year and this year as well, also that you've certainly done your level best to try and set the farm up for that kind of a, I suppose maybe on one side a low cost establishment kind of system, but on the other side to capture some of the benefits, I suppose maybe from carbon if they are going to be there in the future. So from that point of view, I think well done.
Probably more luck than judgment though, Michael.
Unlikely. You're very well informed, in fairness. Listen, Andy, thanks very much for chatting to us again. I think it was really interesting. A lot of farmers and people in the industry here in Ireland are going to listen to this with huge interest, and there's a lot of similarities, but perhaps there's more written down policy, I suppose, maybe that we're seeing coming out of the EU, but nonetheless it's all very much going the one direction. It's very environmental. It's kind of where it's all going to land, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there is a big drive across the EU. You look what's happening in the Netherlands and stuff as well. There is a big drive towards environmental focus all across Europe, and it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But I think it just worries me that we need a food policy to run alongside it. We definitely do.
Listen, Andy, again, thanks very much. We've taken up enough of your time. I'm delighted you could join us again. I know you're very busy and probably getting back into lots of different agronomy work out there as well. So thanks again for joining the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Michael. Good to talk to you.
So that's it for this week. My thanks to Andy for joining me on the show. If you want to find out more about Andy's farm, search through previous episode on whichever podcast app you use. Keep an eye out for local Teagasc crop walks coming up in April and early May throughout the country. There are 2 walks planned in Carlow on April the 13th and in Athy on April the 18th. These walks will go through crop agronomy needs for the crops in 2023. For more details, go to teagasc.ie/events. Finally, don't forget, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review, and follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.